Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming to this information session. Today we're going to talk about commercializing technology at Argonne and the upcoming call for the Chicago Innovation Fund. My name is Diego Fazzi. I am the Innovation Program Coordinator and I work in the Office of Strategy and Innovation. And I'm going to tell you about innovation at Argonne. So first of all, just to clarify, what strategy and innovation office is and what's relationship to TDC, Technology Development and Commercialization Division. So TDC is the office at Argonne that is involved with traditional outreach to industry and commercialization. TDC deals with commercialization of intellectual property, manage strategic partnership projects, creators, and does outreach to industry, engages with professional organizations, RD 100, etc. Strategy and Innovation Office as a parallel mission to a TDC, but we occupy different parts of this technology commercialization process. In particular, SIO operates earlier in the process to identify and qualify customers. And we provide access to innovation programs and other resources for employees that can help them better understand the commercialization process and guide them through this process. So in a visual, if this is our a workflow for the industry partnership strategy of Argonne, goes from customer discovery, customer engagement, contract, post-deal relationship management. You see that a Strategy and Innovation Office occupies the first part of this chart, and customer discovery and partially customer engagement. TDC occupies a much broader spectrum in that area, that all the way up to post-deal contract and post-deal relationship management. So in particular, what I'm going to talk about is how we provide access to innovation programs. We have a rich innovation ecosystem in Chicago, in the region, and also nationally that Argonne participates in and is a member of. And we try to leverage all these different resources to help employees better understand, what the technology commercialization process is and how they can participate. So the objectives, main objectives for these innovation programs are to educate, first and foremost, the employees on the technology commercialization process itself. The more you understand it, the more you can guide your research in a direction that's most relevant to the national lab and to the nation in general. You might want to better understand how your technology fits in the market and what problem it can solve for the real world, basically. It's important because often scientists and engineers work on technologies that are very, very exciting and very important, but not always these technologies help solve real problems in the real world. Through these innovation programs, we can help you identify your customers. So, which are those people who are actually willing to pay for your technology? Because your technology might bring a benefit, but this benefit is not big enough for anybody to pay for it. So, you can have a great technology, but not necessarily somebody will be willing to pay for it. We can help you assess the commercial opportunity for the technology and the most appropriate path to market. Once you determine that there is in fact a market, that you have customers actually willing to pay, how big is this opportunity? Is it like 10 customers, 100 customers, million customers? That makes a big difference. And through these programs, you will learn how to successfully engage with your customers, how to establish and maintain a relationship with them that can last throughout the years. And if your goal is to bring your technology to these customers, it's important that you learn how to keep these customers and grow them. And remember, customers, here's a loose term, and above I define customers as those willing to pay for your technology. So your DOE sponsor is your customer. Your DOE sponsor gives you money to do something that they're interested in, and going through these innovation programs, you can learn how to better engage with your DOE sponsor, how to understand what they want, what it is that they're willing to pay for, and that will help you secure more funding in the future. And finally, even though you're not gonna be commercializing anything at the end of this journey, even if you're not gonna start a company or license your technology, what you will learn will help you, will guide you, help you guide your research at the lab based on what the market actually needs. And that is crucial if you want to have a bigger impact. So here, this is a chart that shows you, what the innovation ecosystem that we're embedded in looks like, and how different programs fit in at different stages. And you might be familiar with some of these programs, for example, LabCorp up there, I Core, or you might have heard of other of these programs. I'm not gonna go into much detail here. What I want to emphasize here is that some of these programs you can participate on behalf of Argonne as an Argonne employee, and our legal and a lawyer, Peter Slonja, is going to talk about this later on in more detail. But so some of these programs, including LabCorp I Core and other, you can participate on behalf of Argonne. As an Argonne employee, this is an educational opportunity. You can learn skills and understand the process and learn more about the market and how your research fits in the market. Some other programs are outside of Argonne. So if you go all the way and you mature your technology to a level that is actually ready for commercialization, you want to take it seriously, maybe license the technology to industry, or even start a company, because sometimes that happens. Then you, at some point, you will have to somehow detach from Argonne. There, again, our attorney will tell you more about this, but these are opportunities that you engage in on a personal level, not as an Argonne employee. And these involve the Chicago Innovation Fund, which we're gonna hear soon with Jason here from the PostK Exchange. As I said, I'm not going to go into a lot of details about all these programs, but I want to emphasize, the DOE LabCorp program, which is a specialized training curriculum aimed at accelerating the transfer of clean energy technologies. Now it's actually expanding. It's not just a focus on clean energies. We have more DOE offices that are participating. But the goal is to commercialize, to accelerate the transfer of technologies from national laboratories into the commercial marketplace, and to establish a set of proven training methods that will equip scientists like you with a better understanding of the commercialization process. So we just had a cohort 3 completed in August, and today we have 8 Argonne projects that graduated from the first 3 cohorts of the program. I want to point out that there will soon be a new call from DOE for cohort 5, and we're currently accepting pre-applications. So if you're interested in applying, please send the following information to me at this email address. It's going to be very short, going to take only a few minutes of your time, because you just need to know your name, your contact, your division, your proposed project, and your invention number. And PostK Exchange, it's it's the main subject of today's session. We're going to talk about the Chicago Innovation Fund, which is managed by the PostK Exchange at the University of Chicago. PostK Exchange is the new center to help scholars and entrepreneurs translate their ideas and new technology into startup businesses and products. They offer a space for proof of concept work, business incubation, collaboration opportunities, and programming from new ventures in the Chicago area. We are a partner, and Argonne has an office space at the PostK Exchange on the UChicago campus, which you can actually access. If you're interested, come talk to me. We work closely together to provide support, guidance, and funding to projects seeking to commercialize technologies through different resources. We work closely to develop an effective pipeline that can assist Argonne PIs and employees in the commercialization process. And also the PostK Exchange helps us run the LabCorp program. So we're going to hear more about PostK Exchange and the Chicago Innovation Fund later from Jason. So now I would like to leave the stage to Hemant from TDC. So we're going to hear more about TDC and how they can help you to commercialize your technology.
I'm with TDC. We have a group of about 10 business development executives who are focused on different divisions. So you may know I work with nuclear engineering. There's John Harvey here. He's going to work with NST. And the other people that you may have worked with, CJ, I remember some people I worked with CJ. Terry, the about 10 folks in TDC. And I'll go through what TDC does, and then you'll know whom to approach and when to approach. So typically, when TDC gets involved, when an external entity wants to engage with Argonne, and an external entity can engage with Argonne in multiple ways. They can, if you go look down the range of partnerships that we deal with. The very basic first step when anybody wants to talk to Argonne is they probably will have an NDA signed with them. So they can discuss stuff which is not in public domain, which is confidential to the external entity, and which is not yet published at Argonne. Right? So once you have a range of discussion after an NDA, you may decide that you have a statement of work that you may want to fund at Argonne. Remember, generally Argonne doesn't fund projects outside. They can get work done outside because they want to make a piece of equipment, which we don't do. But generally Argonne doesn't go out to fund projects unless it's a DOE program which is cooperative with other national labs or with universities. So typically it's not funds out, but it's always funds in. And when you have funds in, you typically will define a statement of work, and depending on the statement of work, it could either be CRADA, collaborative R&D agreement, where the participating entity is also participating in R&D work, or it could be just pay for work. An entity is say, look, I want this Argonne to do this work, and I'll pay Argonne to do X, Y, and Z based on the statement of work. An external entity can also come back and say, well, you have certain IP, certain patents, and they can license the patents. And sometimes, very often, licenses will also involve a CRADA or an SPP, because you also want to transfer how the patents work, how to transfer that knowledge, how to make that piece of technology or equipment or a process. So typically licenses at the initial stages may involve an SPP or a CRADA. We have certain large facilities. We have an APS, we have CNM. We have about half a dozen user facilities. And to be able to use those user facilities, you can sign a user agreement. And if the work is published, then generally the user facilities are free to use. But if you want to do proprietary work, then there is a nominal charge, which actually, if you really go and look back, it's fairly cheap. The user agreements are typically managed by the user facilities themselves, but TDC may get involved depending on where the need is. And finally, if it is a very small piece of work, then we'll help you with a TSA, which is a technical services agreement. It typically is in a few $100,000 or less than a few $100,000, or even $10K or $5K. And then finally, if there's a transfer of materials, then you have to sign a materials transfer agreement, and TDC will help you with any of these agreements, and we work closely with legal on that. Right? As I said, there are multiple touch points. You can work with program divisions. You can work with the user centers for the user agreements. So you can use the APS or CNM. And then finally, TDC, if you want to get TDC involved in any of the work you do, send an email to partners@anl.gov, and it will reach out to one of the people at TDC and help you with any of those engagements. Right? The idea here is, and let me just use this slide. That some people find that Argonne can be tough to work with, but it's not really so. These are all the people that Argonne has worked with, from manufacturing side all the way to pharmaceuticals, and the huge number of companies that Argonne has worked with. So it's not really that difficult to work with Argonne. Just have to be a little patient, simply because Argonne being a DOE lab, it places certain restrictions of what kind of agreements it can get enter into. Going back, as Diego mentioned, TDC generally will get involved if on the later half of an engagement, right? So near the exploration with client engagement, market feedback, industry needs, we do have certain resources to be able to help you with the market study and the industry needs, but it's really driven by the entrepreneur. And the entrepreneur knows what the idea is, what the market is, what the needs are, to the extent that some of the studies, which, like for example, Lux Research, you want to lean on them, TDC can help you with, but really it's really going to be driven by the entrepreneur. At some point in time, when you want to actually work with Argonne, TDC can help you find the right resource at Argonne, either in terms of the scientists or in terms of facilities that you may want to use, and then can help you really assist, not really help, assist with scoping of the project and how you can put a legal envelope around it to create an SPP and CRADA. But really you have to work with the PI to define the scope of the work, right? And the idea really is that license can result from the work you do at Argonne, and the license can be, depending on whether it is SP or CRADA, the participating entity can have certain rights, right? And those rights can be defined based on the statement of work, based on the amount of money that is coming into the lab. Right? So in terms of the CIF, if you want to go and found a company, but you want to use a certain Argonne capabilities or certain Argonne technology, or you want to further the amount of work, you can enter into an SPP or CRADA, or you can license a technology, but there are certain limitations if you're licensing a technology and you're at Argonne. Typically, you really have to leave Argonne if you want to really found a company. And I can give you an example. This is Advanced Diamond Technologies, founded by three folks, John Carlyle and Orlando Osilo. They were at Argonne, and they partnered with Neil Kane, who actually has a Booth connection. He's a Booth graduate. It was founded back in 2003 to advance thin film diamond coatings using natural gas, which is highly repeatable, extremely thin, and had a certain beautiful properties. But at the same time, if you look at it, it was fairly early stage. It really required a lot of further research. They leaned on VCs. They also leaned on several research grants that they could actually use while they were at Argonne as well. But they did independently while they were at ADT. It's 13 years. You can look them up. They have a website. They're in the Argonne ecosystem. They're based about 10 miles from here. But the point is, it's possible, but it's also hard work. You really have to have a startup DNA in you to be able to do that. It's not just technology, it's market, how you deal with customers, how you convince a customer to buy into your products. It's a whole lot that, well, we can assist you, but it really depends on you, right? So that's all I have. If you have any questions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pete Sloniak. I'm one of 2 intellectual property attorneys here at Argonne National Lab. I work closely with SIO and also with TDC in the licensing and the commercialization process. So I'm not going to talk a lot about that today. You've heard a lot about that from Diego. You've heard a lot about that from Hemant. What I want to do is give you some basic ground rules and let you know what the Chicago Innovation Fund is and how it relates to what you do here at Argonne. So the idea is to make sure that everyone has a level playing field and that they understand what are the requirements and what are the expectations. And this all goes hand in hand with something that Hemant had mentioned. As a DOE national lab, there are a lot of extra restrictions on us, more so than on a university counterpart, for example. So making those expectations clear, I think helps everyone understand what the limitations are and what the time frame is. So I know that we're trying to keep this to an hour, so I'm going to try to move quickly through this. But for those of you who have been through the invention reporting process or been through LabCorp, a lot of the themes are going to be very familiar to you. If not, and if you have any questions on anything, feel free to either pick up the phone or email myself or Hemant or your counterpart BDE in TDC. So just with that background context, I just want to let you know that when you are applying to the CIF, you are applying in individual capacity. So my understanding of the CIF, and Jason can correct me if I'm wrong, is that in order to be eligible to apply, the team has to have some nexus to the University of Chicago. And that could in fact be the Marine Biology Lab, Argonne National Lab, Furby National Lab, which are managed by the University of Chicago. But just to be clear, you are applying in your individual capacity, not as an Argonne employee. So this is a little bit different from the other programs that Diego mentioned, such as LabCorp. So just to be clear, just so there's no ambiguity, the CIF is not a laboratory or the DOE program. And awards aren't going to come like a normal DOE-sponsored research or other federal agency award. They're going to come directly to the awardee who may or may not be expected to incorporate and form a company. So just to give you an idea, the money's not going to come to Argonne for you to do the research automatically. Another just real important point that I just want to emphasize, if you take away one thing, take away this. Successful commercialization can depend upon robust IP. And I don't say it will, because there are certain technologies where IP is less important, but I just want you to understand that if you think you have an invention, pay attention. Because this is, the CIF, I should say, may involve third-party judges. I know that Jason and the staff there work very hard to bring in very knowledgeable folks who have either been entrepreneurs or successful in business and marketing to help evaluate these applications after a certain stage. So the disclosure to the CIF of an application may involve third-party judges. And I raise this because there's a concept at patent law that says if you disclose your invention before filing a patent application or taking other preventative measures, you automatically, instantly lose all foreign rights. So you can't file a patent application on that invention as to what was disclosed anywhere else in the country, or in the world. Now, in this country, you have 1 year to get a patent application on file. So it starts the clock. So this is really important. You know, I spent 3 years of law school and a number of years as a practicing patent prosecutor and litigator. I can tell you that it's very complicated, but you don't have to become an expert. If you have an invention, please report it before you go over to the Chicago Innovation Exchange. Argonne's prime contract with the DOE not only requires it, it's something that we are expected to do. Employees are expected to report inventions before disclosing them. Why? Argonne gets graded against other national labs. The more inventions we have, the better we look in the eyes of DOE. The more commercialization potential, the more ability to transfer that technology to a third party, whether that's a big corporation, whether that's a startup. It's just best practice. So please report each invention before publication. So that means before you apply to the Chicago Innovation Fund, go to that lower left-hand link, www.anl.gov/invent, and fill out an invention report. Even if you're not sure, even if you've done it before but you think you have something new, touch base with one of the two attorneys, either myself or Chief Patent Counsel Mark Hilliard, and we'll help guide you through the process. Just to be clear though, filing an invention, or reporting an invention I should say, through that link is not the same as filing an invention before the United States Patent and Trademark Office. That's the protective event. Just letting us know about it in the legal department in TDC, that doesn't get you all the way there. So please just keep that in mind, and you're always encouraged to report early, and if you have any questions, pick up the phone, because if you, for example, disclose an invention to the CIF or to a third party, to a customer at a cocktail party, before you report it to Argonne, you jeopardize any intellectual property rights, which means that your competitor, which may be another startup, which may be a big company, might be able to walk into that area where you thought you had protection. Again, this is a nuanced area. I'm not here to scare anyone. Just, it's best practice and it's the expectation. So help everyone out and make sure you make that report. This is really just restating it. Report all your inventions. It should be reported by now, because I think the fund applications open very soon. So please, if you haven't done it, do it today. Same goes for software. Software developed in the course of your employment at Argonne may be patentable. Big asterisks, lots of case law, lots of nuances. It may be. So please don't just forego that possibility. Send a report. In any event, same principle applies as before. If there's something that you think is valuable that was developed here at Argonne and it's not reported, Argonne doesn't have protection. It can't be licensed, but a competitor may be able to come in. So please report your software as well. Another important point, successful commercialization requires clean title to your IP. I can tell you that I've heard horror stories of startups who went out, who created some IP at a university, went out, tried to commercialize that technology after the fact, and then after about a year and a half of getting some solid footing, getting some good progress in terms of development, customer engagement, found out that the university had licensed the technology away to another party. And don't put yourself in that position. If you're applying to the Chicago Innovation Fund, you think you've got something. If you think you've got something, please, seek an option or a license before any award from TDC. Otherwise, the IP isn't automatically on hold. It might be licensed to another third party. And in a big organization like Argonne with a lot of great initiatives, it's hard for any one individual organization to keep track of everything that's going on. So if you don't approach Argonne's TDC for a license or an option to lock up the technology, it's going to be very difficult later on to undo a future license. So just realize that that's a risk. And the middle 2 points are just emphasizing, what is standard here at Argonne, at any university, at any corporation, that Argonne's prime contract gives Argonne, the Royal Argonne, UChicago Argonne LLC, rights to an invention. But that you don't have an independent right to practice. So please understand that, but we've worked with inventors and authors of software before to give them licenses. This isn't revolutionary or groundbreaking stuff, but there is a process, and that process needs to be followed for everyone's benefit, because investors are going to ask, all right, you've got a great idea, what's the IP, and do you own it? Do you even have any rights to it? And whether that's the Chicago Innovation Fund or a VC or a mom and pop doing their due diligence, it's going to happen. So please help everyone and just be aware of this and consult TDC early. This last slide is perhaps one of the most important. I put it at the end because it is perhaps one of the most complicated as well. Because Argonne is a Department of Energy lab, the Department of Energy has made the decision that Argonne needs to have conflict of interest policies. And it is a complicated area. It's, I think, one where the DOE hasn't given any meaningful guidance in a very long time. And while you will certainly hear the DOE encourage commercialization of intellectual property and they want to see more startups come out of national labs, one of the biggest hurdles, either in terms of time or clarity, is the conflict of interest process. So please get it started early. If you're interested in starting a startup, there are certain limitations. I can tell you right now that if you want to continue doing research in the same area and have a side company, that to DOE is a big issue, and that might not be able to be worked out. But we also have other options, other cleaner breaks, I should say. We have the new entrepreneurial leave program, relatively new, I should say. We had a couple people take that this year. So there are a number of opportunities and options. This is one where where Argonne Legal and TDC will work with your management in order to find a plan that works for them, works for their ultimate customer, which is the DOE program manager, and find a way that works. So there's not a lot, I could talk for hours about this, I have, but just understand that if you're applying to the Chicago Innovation Fund, it's because you think you have something. If you think you have something, forming a company is a serious commitment of time, and there's a couple of check boxes that you need to take. So the earlier you start with us, the better off everyone is going to be in terms of clarity and knowing what are the metes and bounds, what we can do for you and what we can't. So. I know that Jason's got an appointment downtown, so I'm going to ask to hold all questions until the end. If you want to talk to me after, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. But it's just some background for you, some ground rules, and really just points of contact. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason.
All right, thank you everyone. I appreciate your time here on a lovely, steaming hot Wednesday afternoon. Thank you to everyone that just spoke. I'll just highlight one thing. Think of us as a service team here to help you, right? I'm not here at Argonne directly, but I do work for the university, so we have a direct interest in helping you in any way that we possibly can. So the best thing you could do throughout this entire process is go talk to us as soon as possible, right? All of these things are somewhat complicated. I think they are somewhat intimidating for those that haven't been through it before, but once you're in the mix, I've now been for 2.5 years and have seen a number of these projects go through similar issues and considerations at the University of Chicago. It's generally all doable. It's just you have to be thoughtful, and it's a process where it's easiest to go through with the assistance of the individuals in charge of those particular functions. So talk to Pete, talk about your intellectual property, go talk to TDC about the different pathways out, talk to Diego about all the other resources you have access to, and hopefully we can cobble together a plan that works for you, works for your needs, and works for the technology that you're trying to commercialize. And we're happy to answer more questions, but I'm here to tell you about the fund today. So I'm the director of the University of Chicago Innovation Fund. We will fund projects from, as Pete mentioned, any of the national labs that we manage, as well as our entire campus. So we look at a really diverse set of stuff, everything from new clean water technologies to educational technology. We do a lot in life sciences and healthcare IT, a lot in big computing these days out of the Computation Institute, both here at Argonne and at the University of Chicago, and out of our comp sci department. So it's an exciting time to be at the university and to see all the things that are cropping up. Briefly, we are a $20 million fund. We run 2 cycles a year. So if you're just here learning more, we have an application that's open now that closes next Wednesday. So again, if you are going to apply, anything you submit there will be reviewed internally. My staff is under a non-disclosure agreement, but some of our reviewers won't be. So please do review. The best thing you can probably do is send your application before you submit over to Pete and have him take a look over, and so we could redact anything that might be in any way problematic. We oftentimes do that through our diligence process as well. We'll have our associates who are under non-disclosure agreements dig in really deeply, but then we'll have their final slides and your final slides reviewed by Pete to ensure that nothing that shouldn't be disclosed publicly is disclosed publicly. Anyway, so we run 2 cycles a year, as I mentioned, the one that's open currently and then one in the spring. That call for applications will come out in February. We will invest anywhere between $50,000 and $250,000 into any project, and about 2 to 4 companies per round. Our intent with this entire fund is really to catalyze the commercialization of all the technologies that are being invented across all of those sites that I mentioned. It's often a challenge these days because government funding is moving earlier and earlier. It's harder to get government funding for anything that smells like it's trending towards commercialization as opposed to basic research. And on the opposite end, venture capital seems to be moving later and later in the process, right? They're willing to take less early technical risk than they have been in the past. So it's harder to find that set of dollars that help you go from the bench out to something that's a funded startup or to a product. So our hope is really to catalyze this ecosystem to hopefully enable commercial impact from the things that are being invented, and oftentimes to aid humankind, if you'll pardon the broad expression. But we will invest in things that many other people wouldn't or couldn't. Right? We've invested in educational nonprofits, which is not something you see venture capitalists often doing. We have invested in things that are only for license, not for a startup, which makes it hard, obviously, for a venture fund to make money if they can't possibly make money. We do things slightly differently, but that's the intent of the fund. All of this money was raised by alumni donations for this very type of work, and any dollars that are eventually returned by any of our successes go back in the fund to do more of this. So, the university itself doesn't make money on the fund, as it were. And then lastly, and I think very importantly, a lot of this is an educational opportunity. For most researchers that decide they're interested in commercializing their technology or starting a company, by and large, none of them have been through that process before of either starting the company or raising structured venture capital. So we run our fund very much like a venture capital fund. We run a very thorough due diligence process, such that if you go out to raise money from someone else, you've already been through it. You know what it looks like. You know the questions that you're going to get, and you're prepared. On the flip side of that, we also have student associates, some of whom actually come from Argonne as well. We have 20 student associates that work on diligence for each one of our deals. So it's as you can imagine, a very thorough vetting of the technology, the market, the team, et cetera. Our fund is led by some really interesting individuals from across our campus. John Flavin, who's a serial biotech entrepreneur here. He's taken 2 compounds from the bench to a IPO on the NASDAQ. Steve Kimberly, who's the director of the University of Chicago's Technology Commercialization and Licensing Department. And then Scott Meadow, who is a professor at the Booth School of Business, who was previously a venture capital investor for 30 years. Myself, I actually come from both starting a company, working for a venture firm while I got my MBA at the Booth School of Business, and then leading product for another startup with an original background as an investment banker and in finance. As I mentioned, we invest broadly across everything that the university does, where we've been historically weighted towards life sciences and healthcare IT, not because we will only invest in those things, but that is a core competency of the University of Chicago, both with the medical school and our biological sciences division, who are pretty prolific in the amount of intellectual property they generate in any given year. But as you can see, we've over time expanded to clean tech, education. We've done a few things in base materials and physical sciences, and we're seeing more and more in the broad category of IT. So as I'm sure you see here on your campus, the Computation Institute continues to grow and do really exciting work, and many of our projects have come from the Computation Institute or our computer science department. I mentioned our venture style process. I'll keep this as brief as possible. After your initial proposal, we do an internal review, both with my associates, internal staff, and then some local entrepreneurs and investors to decide which proposals seem to have the most merit. Coming out of that, if you are not selected, I offer up my time, an hour debrief, to give you feedback. What did the committee say? What were their questions? What were their concerns? It's very rare that it's a flat no, right? It's not often, I don't think we presume we're smart enough to look at what you have and say, there's no way this is ever a business. But what it's often is well, you didn't give me enough, it was really hard to understand the market, it seems like maybe you're going after the wrong market, or maybe it's just too early. Oftentimes what we see is that where we try to place you in the stage of development, it seems like you're still doing really basic research, not really focused on application. And our feedback then is, we'd still love to meet with you, talk with you about what the process looks like, and maybe 12 months from now, you're in a perfect spot to come back to us. If you are moved forward into diligence, you're assigned a diligence team. It's 4 associates per project. Each team includes 1 PhD or postdoc, 1 business student, 1 law student, and 1 undergrad. So it's a pretty diverse set of backgrounds, but all coming at the deal from different angles. This all leads up to a big final presentation day. So you can think of it, if you've seen any startup pitches, or if you've seen the Booth School's New Venture Challenge, it's akin to that. You get 10 minutes to present your business proposal, essentially give your startup pitch to our external review board. And this is the board that Pete was discussing earlier. We have 14 individuals, and they are a combination of serial entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, industry experts that fly in from around the country for that final presentation day. You get 10 minutes to basically sell them on the merits of your proposal, and then 10 minutes of Q&A. In the afternoon, our diligence associates present their diligence findings. We dug into all these areas. Here are the pluses, here are the minuses, and then we make an investment recommendation. Coming out of that day, literally the very end of that day, we get a formal investment recommendation from our committee, and we announce either that afternoon or the following morning who will be investing in. Once that's over, though, our engagement is not over, right? We want to do everything we can post-investment to help accelerate your progress. What mentors are you looking for? What other sources of funding can we help line up, whether that's our SBIR expert or connections to other angel investment groups or venture capitalists? The big question always is, well, what does this have to look like to actually get funded? We are generally looking for a few key tentpoles. One, there's a potential for impact, whether that's a monetary return back to the fund, because we think it's such a groundbreaking technology in such a big market, whether it's completely changing the world in an exciting way that puts Argonne's and the University of Chicago's name at the forefront of a new area of technical expertise, or impacting a disease state that, again, no one else would have attacked otherwise. Highlighting a clear and acute market need in your application is critical, because it's always hard to tell with early stage technologies who exactly is going to use it and whether they actually will. So the best thing you can do is give us really clear examples. Here's a specific use case. I've talked to X number of people. They all have that need. They really want it. They're just waiting on me, right? That's the base case scenario. Outcomes. So you'll see in the application, there's a section to fill out the milestones, the proposed use of funds. Again, back to our theory of government funds moving earlier, venture moving later, there's this gap. There's this gap that needs to be filled between where the DOE funding or government funding will stop and where a venture capitalist or a customer will jump in. So the question is what you're asking for enough to get you from point A to point B, whether that's just our money alone or our money plus an SBI or whatever the case might be, and what do you have to prove with that money for that next person to jump in? So the best application would look something like, our technology is this far along. Here's the data we've generated that's really exciting that shows that it could work. We need to run this specific next test, maybe even a pilot in the real world. And on the basis of that pilot, we feel very confident that we can go win that SBIR or land that investment and be off to the races, right, as building a company and building a product. The question always, where some of these fall down, is there's no clear milestone that gets anyone else interested. There's no clear endpoint. And knowing that we only can invest $250,000 at the top end makes that a challenge for us, right? Because it then just becomes a check down a black hole if there's no clear opportunity to move it forward after our investment. And then lastly, all of this should be focused on impact outside of the university and our ecosystem. Again, we're trying to move technologies out of our walls, so those things that are specifically just ongoing research are not a fit for the fund. As an example, our most recent cycle, which was completed last spring, was a great example of what we tend to see. We had applications from across the entire ecosystem, including from Fermilab. We had one from MBL this time around. We'll see what comes through when we close next Wednesday. And we pick 5 to move into diligence, which is a hard cap. I'll skip through a few slides to save time for Q&A. I mentioned the associates program and the presentation day. As for the investments, so for nonprofits or other structures, we will deploy the capital as grants. Generally, though, we are looking to invest in companies that are being created that either exist or will exist to take our investment. We invest in the fastest, friendliest way we know of that we possibly can. It's called the SAFE. I don't have to dig into details now. I'm happy to talk about it at length afterwards. But essentially, it is an instrument that allows us to avoid any negotiations around valuation or pricing or any specific terms. It's an agreement that whenever you go raise money from someone else, we get whatever terms they get. The idea there is we don't want to be in a position where we're negotiating against our own researchers, where we're having to battle back and forth over terms, especially because many of you haven't gone through that process before, right? So we'd rather advise you as you're negotiating with other people, help give you the tools so that you understand what you're negotiating, and not be in a position where we feel that we're conflicted against our own researchers. After we invest, again, we want to add as much value to you as we possibly can. We can do that by incubating you on our premises and giving you desk space, putting you through a number of other programs, helping you identify other sources of funding. there's some reporting that's required, but it's a lightweight structure. It's essentially a monthly kind of check-in email, how are things going, what can we do to be helpful? And generally use that as a flag to see what we can do for you, right? It's by checking in with that frequency, it helps us identify the areas where you're having trouble and try to connect you with those that can be helpful. Lastly, and then we'll wrap it up, key dates. So the application has been open. Hopefully you've seen a couple of emails get bandied about. Given that you're here, I would assume that is a yes. The applications are due next Wednesday at 11 a.m. and that's a pretty hard cutoff date because our process is pretty jam-packed once that final button is hit. I have to review all of them. I distribute them to our associates for some initial review and rating. And then we have to get them together and ready for our review committee to review the following week. So we will get back to you on the 26th with the 5 teams that are moving forward into diligence. And if you're not moved forward, that's when I offer up my time to meet one-on-one. And I'm happy to come out here to Oregon and spend an hour going through your proposal and hopefully help you find other ways to move forward and position you to come back to the fund at a later date. And then our final presentations are December 2nd. So please have at it with questions. I'll ask my comrades to come up and join me again. You can apply just following that bit.ly link. I think, Diego, I'm not sure if you'll send around the slides later on. This will all actually be posted, I believe, internally on the website, along with a video of the session. So with that, thank you everyone for your time. I appreciate it on a Wednesday afternoon just before lunch. And please, if you have any questions, don't be shy. Yes, sir.
How many applicants do you typically get?
It varies pretty wildly by cycle with no particular rhyme nor reason. So it seems to be 20 to 60 per cycle. I know I looked last night, I think we have 31 or 32 that have started. What I would say, not everyone who starts actually completes. My expectation is we'll probably end up in the 20 to 30 range this cycle with what I'm seeing so far. Yes, sir.
Could you maybe give a very crude example of how the safe thing was when you go to your next round of funding? You know, in terms of how that would work.
Sure. So the SAFE actually stands for a simple agreement for future equity. It's a reasonably standard agreement these days in early stage startup investing. Originally came out of an organization called Y Combinator out in the Valley. Essentially, you can think of it as an option. I don't know if you're familiar with options. Sorry, it's an agreement that says when you raise your next round of funding, we're entitled to the same terms as that next round of funding. Our SAFE does not include a cap or a discount. Again, taking any negotiation completely off the table. What that says is essentially we're getting the worst deal humanly possible as a fund because we invest now and a year later when you've put that money in your technology, you've made a ton of progress and you're much more valuable, that's when our money becomes real. Right, so at that point when you go raise hopefully a structured venture round and they say you're worth $5 million, and we'll give you $1 million, right? So we'll make math easier. How about we'll try this? You're worth 4, I give you $1 million, right? So they own 20% of you. We convert at the same time. So it's as if our money magically appeared at that date and on the same terms as that venture fund. So instead of taking $1 million, you're taking 1.25. What that means is, not to get too complicated into investment math, our money went in a year ago before you'd done any of that work. So you were probably worth a whole heck of a lot less than you were when you took their money, but we still come in, like our percent gets calculated when you're worth that much more. So we get immediately diluted, right? Our investment immediately takes a bit of a hit as to where it could have been. But again, the whole purpose of that, and our documents are published publicly along with FAQ. If you get, if you move into diligence, not only can you peruse them, I would encourage you to go review them, look online, and the other comments people have around safes. There's thoughts in both directions, and then you can also have it reviewed by an attorney. The issue is we don't negotiate our terms at all, so it's kind of a non-negotiable term sheet because it is so friendly. There's only one protective term in there called the most favored nation status. What that means is if you raise any significant amount of money directly after taking our investment, we get whatever terms you raised at. It's basically so you don't immediately go cut like a sweetheart deal with your next door neighbor, and we're left in the lurch. Please, fire away.
So how long do you typically do the acceleration period? So is that something when you invest, you expect this money to last a year or 6 months?
So there's no cap. This isn't kind of a standard grant where you have to set a particular time frame. This isn't repeating funding. This is a one-off investment. Again, it's all tied to those milestones. So there's no elegant answer. It comes down to what are you hoping to accomplish? How much does it take to accomplish that, and what's the time frame that you propose. But we're also not, sitting on your back every day saying, well, we said at month 3 you'd be here, right? Because we know these things are challenging, they take time, and they're not generally a straight and direct path, right? There's a lot of changes along the way. So the expectation is whatever plan you show up with will not be the thing that actually happens in the real world. But it's a way for us to kind of assess how thoughtful have we been around what has to happen, how good are the numbers, have you asked for enough money? We've oftentimes, teams have come to us and asked for 100,000 and we push them to take more because we've said, one, either we don't think your milestone will be attractive enough to the investor, but we think your technology is great, so you need to do more, and so take an extra 100. Or we've said, we don't think you're hiring enough people, or this is probably going to take an extra 6 months, longer than you thought, so you need more money. We do as much as we can to validate your budget with the outside world. Yes?
One specific question about the technology categories. Do we have to pick one out of that, or can you choose multiple? The technology category matters very little on the application, right? It's we're just trying to get the applications to the right people. I would say whatever you are predominantly, categorize it as such, because your application will be routed to a set of judges that have said they would like to review those types of applications, right? So if you are, tell me a little bit about it, maybe I can give you a better answer. Yeah, for example, it's a methodology that BOSS is analyzing structures. It can be applied in life science, can be applied in physical science.
So is this a methodology, is this an algorithm, a computer software?
Yeah.
So I would call it IT, or if it has a strong life sciences first application, maybe healthcare IT. The underlying technology is a computer, right? It's software.
Yeah.
So you want those types of individuals taking a look at it. I don't know, you want like a clean tech person who digging into software.
Yeah, and I think the emphasis on really word application is so that those specific industry person may have more knowledge and understanding of what the impact would be.
Maybe. I think that I would save that level of feedback for the final round, right? I think you'll get that kind of deep industrial feedback at the finals. For this first review period to get moved into diligence, my gut feel is put it under IT, and that'll serve you best. Sorry. All right, sir, fire away.
This is kind of have questions from before. I have the problem with the 3-minute rule. I didn't know it was discussed before I got in the room, but gradients of commercialization and definitions of commercialization within the Argonne parentheses. Is there a guideline document that describes what the commercialization process and kind of boundaries are of what it's considered?
That is a fair question, which I am ill-equipped to answer. I know Diego had put up a chart earlier, which I'm sure he'll be happy to send around, that gives you a bit of an idea of the process out. Diego maybe can answer that question more specifically than I can around what constitutes commercial activity versus not in the eyes of Argonne and the DOE.
Well, I mean, and also anything that you do in the interest, of the laboratory, any activity you undertake that will not benefit you personally or an external entity, then that can be considered an activity that you undertake on behalf of Argonne. If you go out and participate in an activity that it will eventually benefit you as an individual, or if you have a company, your personal company, then that's clearly a personal commercialization effort that we cannot directly support, but still, we can definitely talk about ways that can lead you to that stage. Of course.
I can give you a more clarifying.
Yeah, please.
Put on the question. Again, better questions give better answers.
I would say it's probably best to save that question and go meet with Pete and with Diego directly.
Well, I'll give you it's the whole idea of you ask 10 people what commercialization is, you get 12 answers. Right? So in tech to market, they have one definition of what commercialization is. R&D to practicality, to basically from the R to the development and demonstration has a different definition of commercialization. Innovation funds have a different definition of what commercial is. So that's what I'm trying to get a handle on. Because again, like I said, I got $1 million in commercialization money. Every time I want to spend it, they say, that's not commercialization. I'm like, that's marketing. I'm like, okay, I'm really confused about what commercialization is versus marketing versus tech to market, R&D to practical to demonstration. But almost every time I say, this is the way I understand it, they say, no, that's not right. And I say, what is right? And I say, well, look at this, 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 and this. Like, okay, now I got 4 inputs. Which one's right?
You know, I'd be happy to follow up on this and maybe sit down with TDC as well and you know, answer any questions you might have. Of course, commercialization is not one thing. That's a problem. You know, you might commercialize technology in several different ways, and each different ways must be treated differently. So,
and that's what I'm really getting at, is I think it's context-based. Right? And what your product is, what your idea is, and the hard science and the soft science and the people think. Because everybody, again, since somebody's got their hand up, I'm going to say copyright versus licensing versus patenting. Right? Patenting has some really bad experiences with trying to get things through patent. They say that's not patent. This is a unique space. I truly believe it is, and say they have no money to explore that space. So this innovation fund now would be a place to get into that, but then they say, oh, what if you can't commercialize what your patent did? We can't offer a patent. So those are some of the obstacles I've run into before.
look, I really strongly suggest that we sit down after this session and talk and we can figure it out.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Otherwise, I think I'll give you your mornings back. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, I appreciate your time. Have a lovely week and enjoy the day.